Hi there. I am Ann McClendon. I am the interim principal at West Stanley High School. I have been at North Stanley Middle School and Ridgecrest Elementary School, and I cannot remember a time when hearing the word bus put a smile on my face. As an administrator, we have struggled to find bus drivers. We've spent hours upon hours of instructional time calling bus drivers, calling subs to come. My assistant principal over the past 2 years at the middle school would spend 4 to 5 hours of the instructional day, literally. I could not even ask her to do other things because off and on 4 to 5 hours, she had to be utilized for calling and trying to secure a sub for the buses. Obviously, this is not an effective way to use instructional personnel. Over the past couple of years as well, I have had to ask teachers to drive buses because that's the only way that we could get students to school, and that was the only way that we could get students home. Obviously, that is not an appropriate way to utilize our teachers, but they graciously did so. Probably about 4 years ago, I had my license as well as a principal. And there was probably about 3 weeks straight at the beginning of the school year where I would get up and I would drive a bus. I would go and be a principal, and then I would drive a bus again in the afternoons. Again, this is just it's not a good way to use instructional personnel, because what does instructional personnel do? They help our children. They're student-centered. At my present location, at West Stanley High School, there's been multiple occasions this year where students have been late to school because we have been unable to find a driver, and we would have to send a second route out. Obviously, this makes parents very upset. Over the past probably 5 years, I'll say, because it's been more than just 1 year, I've had to talk to angry parents, and I understand that. I would be angry too if my child was still standing at the bus stop an hour after they were supposed to be picked up. So real reasonable concerns when I would get angry parents on the phone at 8 o'clock in the morning, and uncomfortable conversations as well when we try to do our best to serve our students and our families. We've had students to miss the bus because we would have to send a sub bus out, and of course then they would just go back inside and they would be absent for the day. They'd say, I'm not coming to school. So the lack of having bus drivers or subs impacts our instructional services, and it impacts our students, your children. I do applaud that we are finally looking at a solution, because we just cannot continue to ignore that there is a problem in Stanley County regarding our bus drivers. We do have excellent bus drivers who are going across the county line to make double and to get benefits because, not because they dislike our schools, but they can make more money. They can support their families more. So if with this solution we are able to get these fine folks back in Stanley County, we could serve all of our students in a much more effective way. I also applaud Mr. Lambert and Dr. James and the rest of the central office folks, because they do care about your concerns, or they would not have set up this meeting and the meetings over the past couple, days, and of course, hearing your concerns. So I really appreciate the fact that they are trying to find solutions to your concerns as well. So again, I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I do think that we need to find a solution to a problem that has been ongoing throughout my tenure as a principal. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
And now we're going to ask Chris Jonathan to come forward, please. He's principal at Saxton Middle School.
Good evening, everyone. Like Ms. Calvert said, I'm the principal at South Stanley Middle School. This is my first year there, and I'm coming from a different district, and I can tell you that myself and my AP probably spends anywhere from 2 to 4 hours a day just trying to find sub-drivers. We've put things on our website trying to, because we had a few vacancies, and we still haven't been able to fill all of our vacancies as far as bus driver positions. And we actually got to the point where we had to consolidate 2 of our bus routes, which put students on the bus a little bit earlier in the morning and later in the evening, which obviously is not ideal. And like Mrs. McClendon said, our main goal as far as instructional personnel is to use them for instruction. And I know we have huge efforts at South Stanley Middle to increase our academic success this year. And without having an actual assistant principal that is able to, to focus on instruction, it's not helping our schools. It's definitely not helping our school, because our goal at our school is for us to be in classrooms, to help lead learning, to help model instruction, and to give teachers feedback regarding instruction so that teachers can be successful and increase academic performance. And that's not possible with our current situation at our school, just because it's taken so long to find drivers. Now, our drivers come from South Stanley Middle School, South Stanley High School as teacher assistants as well. A lot of them are driving 2, 3, 4 days a week just to cover our bus routes that we have currently. I know about 3 weeks ago we were down 4 drivers out of 10. We had a few out on leave, and we had a few out just because of situations that happen situations occur daily, and you never know if someone's going to need a day off. And I'm not talking about days off that are not scheduled. The actual driver will tell you, I need a day off in 3 weeks, and it's so hard to find personnel to cover that route without calling the same people, like I said, because our assistants come from our school and the high school, and we haven't been able to find anybody who's willing to, be willing to drive for what we're, for what we're paying now, just because of the fact that our drivers want full time. And I got to say, we do have some really, really good bus drivers that are really dedicated to our school system, and definitely to South Stanley Middle School, who are willing to work a lot more hours if they were able to, but just with the current condition, they're not able to, just because we have multiple routes that are unfull, and it's not possible. Also, I would say, looking at a different option from where we were this year is definitely something that we're interested at South Stanley Middle School, just because of the fact that we want to increase student success and academic success. And like I said, currently, we're not utilizing our resources effectively. So.
And now Mr. David Rhodes, principal at Baden Elementary School.
Good evening. As Ms. Calvert said, I am Damon Rhodes. I am principal at Baden Elementary School. This is my 2nd year at Baden Elementary, and this is my 14th year working in Stanley County Schools as a principal. So the bus driver situation and shortage I've seen from many different levels and many different schools. Speaking from a consistency standpoint for our families and our students, the student day starts in the morning for many of our students with that bus pickup. And our parents and our students depend on that time being consistent from day to day. And as with any other substitute situation, when there's a sub bus driver, those schedules get changed. And just as Ms. McClendon said, there are times when we field calls from parents because the bus hasn't shown up, the bus came at a different time, my student missed the bus. Those things we deal with on a consistent basis. And I think with more consistency on the bus driver employment, we'll alleviate some of those issues. Also at Baden, we have 4 buses that we run on a daily basis and 1 EC bus. When we do have drivers that are absent, we are, like other schools, we're forced to use our teacher assistants to drive those routes. And we use our teacher assistants for daily instruction with students. And when we have to take those teacher assistants away from those students and away from those instructional duties, that makes it more of a challenge to grow those students academically. Luckily, the teacher assistants that I have at Baden have been very cooperative and understand when those routes need to be run, and we make things work. But I think the solution of the staggered start times and being able to employ bus drivers on a more of a full-time basis will alleviate some of that issue also. I can speak also from an example. This year at Baden, we have some hours for bus drivers we provided during the day, and it has given a couple of my drivers full-time status, and our bus driver attendance for those particular bus routes and bus drivers has been tremendous. I think that increased time that you give them, I believe that increases their dependability, their responsibility, their dedication to the job to do what is right for those students. And once again, I go back to the consistency of the schedule for a student. And I've had several staff members at Baden who have students at North Stanley Middle and North Stanley High School who have gotten phone tree messages several days that say, we do not have a driver for this particular route, and it will either be late arriving or parents have to accommodate getting their student to school or home. And that puts our parents in difficult situations too as far as their work schedule. So just kind of piggybacking on what Mr. Johnson and Ms. McClendon said, these are issues we deal with on a daily basis, and I commend the committee that has worked on this plan, and I appreciate folks being here tonight to give your input, because I think we all want to do what's right for Stanley County, and we all want to do what's right for our students. Being the parent of 2 current students, I think that's our goal, is to do what is in the best interest of our students, regardless of how it's going to, change our schedules or our lives. If we do what's best for the school system and the students, that should be our goal. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Michael Lambert. I'm the Transportation Director for Stanley County Schools, and I want to first thank the principals for coming and expressing the current conditions we have regarding bus driver recruitment and retention. Tonight you're going to see a presentation on staggered bell times. Staggered bell times has been discussed by Stanley County Schools for several years now, but back in November we were tasked with the opportunity to look into evaluating the current condition of Stanley County and how staggered bell times could fit our schedules. And so as a part of that task, we have engaged with a consulting firm, which is School Efficiency Consultants. And the person representing them tonight is Mr. Scott Denton. Mr. Denton is an expert in the field of transportation for pupils. He has been a director at Franklin County, at Wake County, and most recently retired from Durham Public Schools as the Associate Superintendent of Auxiliary Services. And he has been on the board for the North Carolina Pupil Transportation Association and is now the Executive Director. So I will turn this over to Mr. Denton. He will present the staggered bell time proposals. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm going to wait until my presentation comes up here so we can kind of get going. We're going to show it on the screen. Yes, we are. There we go. All right. So, common question. What are staggered bell schedules? What does it really mean to have a staggered bell schedule? Well, it's what it says. It's school bell times that are strategically different to allow the district to address some educational or operational objectives. And basically, some schools have an earlier start and dismissal time. Some have a later start and dismissal time. In highly populated areas, that can be what we call tiers or different schedules. They can be 3 or 4 different schedules that are observed, because if there are a lot of kids living in one area, you can run a lot more, one bus can serve a lot more students. Your times can be more compressed. In a county like Stanley, the roads are longer, and not as many kids living on those roads, so you can only have 2 schedules that would work in this county because of the length of route that we currently have. So we'll be looking at the possibility of a 2-tier schedule here, or 2 bus routes per bus versus many others in other counties. So what are the objectives really? Well, of course, transportation is always safety. It's the first thing we always talk about in transportation, and we would never compromise that. But on time is also one of the other very important things that we have to accomplish. And what you've heard from our principals tonight already is the importance of the on-time piece. Addressing the bus driver shortage, I was in a hotel room not long ago in Winston-Salem and saw a story about this very thing. So it's not just Stanley County. This thing is a statewide, national problem, and it's not getting any easier. It's complicated by a licensing process, which I'm currently working on with the Department of Motor Vehicles through NCPTA. And the process for hiring a bus driver takes 3 to 4 months sometimes to get a bus driver on board. We're going to meet with that organization and try to streamline that process to make it better and faster for people to get their license. Because you can imagine if you apply for a job and it takes you 3 months to get your license and get a paycheck, and actually you got to wait for a paycheck to come another month, you already found something else to do. So we got to shorten that process up to allow us to recruit bus drivers better and get them on board faster through licensure. Of course, improving transportation efficiency, we'll talk about this a little bit. Transportation is the only educational part of Stanley County schools and other districts that is rated on a formula. And the formula basically is students transported, it's number of buses you operate, and the amount of money you spend. And you compare it against every other county that way. And a formula compares that, and there's some, I wish I could explain the entire formula, what works behind the scenes, but the short story is that the fewer buses you operate, the more students you transport, and with the least amount of money makes you more efficient. And the state funds you 100% when you're very efficient. When your operation is less efficient than that, meaning that maybe you use too many buses, or you spend a little bit too much money, or you don't transport enough students, then your transportation efficiency rating goes down, and then local dollars are used to supplement your transportation operation. That's what happens here in Stanley County. We're about 89% efficiency rating here, which means it's about $264,000 that you have to kick in as citizens into the local budget in order to run transportation. Part of this proposal will take that $264,000 and use it, and it'll become state money instead of local money. And that'll be a good thing. And then, of course, protecting instructional time. You've already heard from principals about that. When buses are late, kids are late to class, it affects instructional time. We believe that this proposal will work on that. So what are some common decision-making considerations? Solving the bus driver crisis, before and after school care issues. Personal schedules are a big deal. And by the way, this whole thing is being videoed. It'll be on the website for you to pull up and look at later on. Before and after school care issues, anybody's personal schedule is affected, that is a negative part for some people. Some people won't be affected as negatively, others will be. It's unavoidable to make a change such as this and not have somebody affected in a negative way, okay? So it's impossible. But at the same time, what we try to do is minimize that negative impact to any family, because we don't want anybody to be negatively affected. It is a byproduct of making change. Pick up of students before 7 o'clock in the morning and after 5 p.m., pretty much that's a daylight issue. This time of year, time just changed, it's dark in the morning, right? So the earlier you pick up before 7 a.m., if you have students waiting beside the road, particularly elementary students, then that becomes more of a concern about kids getting on in the dark, or even getting off in the dark in the afternoons. This time of year it won't be a problem because now it's getting dark at 7 o'clock, right? So it's not an issue this time of year. But as time changes, sometimes those issues have to be considered. Sometimes there are sleep issues, and when I worked in Durham, the issue was for that board, they were interested in high school kids getting a lot more sleep. They thought it would help their performance in school. So they decided to start all the high schools later and to have all the elementary schools start earlier, or some of them anyway, and middle school started earlier. So some of those kind of things go into it. Input from you all, input from the community. We just met with a group of daycare providers earlier this afternoon, and we got their input from this whole process. So getting community input and suggestions from the community is a very important part of this process. Accommodating after-school activities, particularly for if you're going to change high school bell times for work and for athletics. That's a big impact on work and athletics if you're going to change bell schedules. Impact on after-school learning programs, if we have them here, then there can be some impact on that by shifting bell times. Efficiently using the resources we just talked about, and of course the ability to provide school buses with consistent service and arrival on time. We'll always keep that in the forefront of our minds. So currently in transportation, They're using 86 buses. There are drop-offs 15 to 30 minutes before bell time currently. Something that makes this county efficient in one way is riding middle school and high school kids together. Doing that allows you to run one road and pick up 2 different schools. Can't get much more efficient than that, okay? So we're not looking at splitting high school, middle school, because you're already efficient in transporting those students, all right? Most elementary buses are single tier. I say most. You got a couple that are currently running some double runs that are out there. Our target of buses operated to achieve 100% budget rating, and efficiency and budget rating are the same thing. So if you hear me say budget or efficiency, that's what we're talking about, is actually 20 buses. We've actually run the numbers more recently. The presentation you're watching or looking at is the very first presentation we did for the board, and we haven't changed it so that we want to be transparent on what we gave them, okay? So some of this, we actually have gone back since then. I've worked with Mike a lot in his office. We've gone through every single bus route, talked about every single bus driver to try to make sure we looked at what would work, what wouldn't work, and we arrived at cutting 20 buses for next year if this proposal goes through, okay? Route time for the longest buses are about 110 minutes, and based on that, you can't really run those buses but one tier. There's not enough time in between the actual times for one school to end and another school to start before you got to have time in there. It's called run time window. The amount of time it takes to get from to drop all your kids off and get to the next school on time is your run time window, and it can't exceed, I believe we have 90 minutes, is what you'll see later on. And so if you're averaging 110, when you got a 110-minute bus route, there's no way you can run that bus at another school, okay? And then use of double routing, or coverage routing as I call it. You heard a principal say earlier there's some doubles being run already because when a bus driver doesn't show up, they got to double the routes. They got to go out and run a second route. We don't like to do doubles. Sometimes you build a double in, depending on what's happening. If you can go a quarter mile up the street and drop off an apartment complex with 40 kids, and you get right back to the school in 10 minutes, and I'll put that bus in the front of the line, let it go make that run and come right back. And before the other buses are pulling out, it's already loading another load, right? It's a great double opportunity. There's not gonna be many of those in Stanley County, okay? It's too rural, so just understand that. All right, so operational advantages, of course, you increase your budget rating, resulting in lower local budget contribution. You improve or potentially eliminate the bus driver shortage. Based on the numbers we've gone through so far, we would eliminate the bus driver shortage for next year in doing this. We would have some built-in backups, and I believe in trying to make this whole thing as seamless as we possibly can. And when I say seamless, I don't want a principal or a teacher to know when a bus driver's out. I don't want them to know. If the proposal goes through, we'll talk about this in a little bit. We're looking at hiring some transportation operational people to take over the responsibilities for the APs about finding drivers and managing their driver behavior, pulling camera footage, that sort of thing. So it takes that responsibility off the APs and out of the school and gives it to the transportation department, okay? That's one of the things that's possible as part of this. What we want to do is build in the backups so that if we have a shorter route at one of the high schools and that time allows us to run, because we had a call out at one of the elementaries, we can route that bus over and take care of that. That would be a seamless thing for the elementary school. They wouldn't even know it, that we just run that route. And if you build it in that way, then you have a lot fewer bumps in the road when you have a call out. And you're gonna have call outs. People had the flu, they've got their own kids they gotta take care of. There are gonna be issues when folks call out, no matter if you have full-time drivers or not, you're still gonna have call outs. It happens. But we wanna try to build a system so that it is as seamless as possible for our schools. So when we do have call outs, we got it covered. Reduction in buses will allow the LEA as local education agency, allows Stanley County schools to actually convert the yellow school buses that are not being used to activity buses. The buses, there's some criteria for that. Buses got to be 8 years old, and so the criteria is up here. The advantage for that is activity buses cost about $90,000 a piece. So the county does not have to buy any activity buses. We've identified 5 buses out of the buses that we park next year that could be converted. So that's $450 grand at one fell swoop that the county does not have to spend on activity buses. Okay, so that's a big advantage for actually parking those school buses. All right, so what are some constraints about, because there are some constraints built into a multi-tiered busing system. What works in the morning may not work in the afternoon, and here's why. There are a couple things that affect it. One is the length of day is different for elementary schools and middle schools and high schools. High schools have a longer length of day, middle school is slightly shorter, and elementary even shorter than that. So you have to consider what time the school takes in and what time they let out. And it's different for all three of those schools, right? So what works in the morning, you can drop off 15 to 30 minutes ahead of time. In the afternoon, you got to load those kids, and then you got to transport them, and you got to drive to the next school. That window of time is shorter in the afternoon than it is in the morning, okay? So what works in the morning may not work in the afternoon. Time and distance really does not change. We cannot shorten the roads in Stanley County to make them easier to travel. So it takes time to drive those routes. Buses only go 45 maximum miles per hour, and you have to have time built in to arrive on schedule at different places. AM drop-off will still be 15 to 30 minutes before bell time, although you'll see in this presentation, I think a bit later, that our school system is willing to allow any elementary students to be dropped even 30 minutes earlier than that. So they'll allow an hour early drop-off instead of 30 minutes early drop-off if this proposal goes through. So those elementary schools would then allow parents to drop off at 8 if they're a 9 o'clock start versus 8:30. No one at home is something that we've labeled as we call it NOAA, but no one at home is when a bus arrives and nobody's there to receive the student. Stanley County Schools currently has a policy that does not allow kindergarten through 3rd grade, I believe was the 3rd grade, to be dropped off without a responsible person, an older sibling, a parent, a neighbor, however that works. So that's something that Stanley County Schools will continue to make sure happens. They don't believe in putting students out. Those K-3 students need to be protected, and they want to make sure that happens. Logistics, bus and drivers, we talked about the necessary time between bell times to arrive on schedule. Sometimes earlier AM drop-offs, now we don't think we're going to have any of that. We need to look at it very closely. We don't think we're going to have any earlier than 30 minutes ahead of time. Sometimes principals don't want to do that because you're asking staff to work longer than their normal day. So that's not really a popular thing, and our goal is to not have to do that. But I like to bring it up because it may be a route or two has to do that, and we don't want people to be surprised by it. Double runs, we talked about those. And it's possible that field trips would be limited at some of the elementary schools to some of the hours during the daytime, whereas when you have a single-tier system and you're running your buses, you don't have as much limit on field trips because you got drivers that cover at the school, and when they're there, and it's not as big a deal. But when you got to arrive at one school and then serve a second school, there's a limit on the amount of time available for a field trip. And so that's one of the constraints that is there. Just some sample times for other districts that are around that start and end times, and all this is on the website, so you can certainly study these at your leisure. Current bell times for Stanley County Schools, you probably already know what they are for the schools that you're in. And then the overview of the bell options. The first option and the option we recommend, and the only option that's feasible, quite honestly, is no change to the high school, middle school. We talked about they're already efficient enough with the running the high school, middle schools together. The only exception to that would be Albemarle High School, Albemarle Middle School currently runs separate buses. One would be a earlier start, high school. We'd move the later start for Albemarle Middle to 9 o'clock. So they'd be paired together. And actually the actual second option's on here. We're not even going to talk about it much, and I'll tell you why. You'll find out later in the presentation that the average time needed to run the high school routes is not sufficient to be able to double those routes up anyway. So we really can't even consider option number 2. This was, again, the preliminary thing we did with the board, and we didn't know at that time exactly what some of those things were, so we had to actually do some work on that. So pros and cons of option 1. You reduce or eliminate the bus driver shortage, which is a very important thing. We can get to 99.31, I think, % on the budget rating, which will utilize most of that $264,000 that we're looking to utilize from state money versus local. And then we're not really we're affecting the fewest schools possible to do this. I know the ones that are affected don't feel that way. Okay, I get it. I'm a parent, I've been there, I know. Okay, I know the ones that are affected don't feel like that. And you feel like you're being picked on probably. I get that too. I can assure you, I don't know any of the principals, I don't know anybody that's here. Our entire proposal is based on what will work logistically. What was best to serve logistically, what can arrive on time. That's how we approach the work, okay? One of the other pros, of course, we can get fewer schools, we talked about that. Fewer cons, earlier or later start times for elementary schools will affect personal schedules, we talked about it already. before and after school care programs, and families might be affected in the pick up and drop off of elementary schools in the dark. That is also an issue that is out there. It does not impact middle school, high school athletics, after school programs or employment, which is a good thing. Redesign of the bell times allow for building coverage of routes when drivers are out. We talked about that. And yellow buses can be parked and be converted to activity buses. And a few additional cons are yellow bus availability for field trips limited, and older students not at home in the morning to wait with younger students because they've already gone to school. So that's one of those child care issues. All right, how many schools are affected in under option 1? All high school bell times remain the same. Middle schools, we have 1 school changing. In elementary, there are 5 schools that change by 5 minutes per day, 5 schools that change by an hour and 10 minutes per day. And those 5 are the ones that are affected the most. I'm going to kind of skip through the second option because it's really not an option to be able to go over. The times for the buses that it requires to get the buses to school, they won't work. So again, they're a very original thing that we showed the board, and someone will go through this one fairly quickly. It's on the website if you want to look at it, but again, it's really not feasible. So key questions about multi-tier schedules. Why not separate high school, middle school? We talked about that already. Why 2 tiers instead of 3 tier? We also talked about already. The 2 tiers, just Stanley County being more rural, it's the only option that will actually work here. 3 tiers just simply won't work because of time. Can we flip the start times of option 2? Short answer is maybe, but it's not recommended, and actually the answer is no, we can't do that because of the amount of time it takes for us to get from one school to another. So there would be, if we did that, there would be some things that would be things we'd have to consider. So how much will Stanley County schools potentially save? Again, the $264,000 is generated from a budget rating simulator program that tells us how much local money is being used already. And the local money, if Stanley County schools becomes 100% efficient, that local money then turns into state money, and the local money can be used for something different, okay? Stanley County schools will need to operate 20 fewer buses during 1920, and of course, the bad news is, if there is bad news, this formula thing goes every year. So every year, every LEA submits their data, and now it's a new set of data that has to be compared. So what works this year may or may not work exactly next year. The changes would not be radical, they would not be significant, I don't think. But you have to understand that it's never a guarantee. The 264 may not be 264 next year because of the cost of different things that the transportation did this year, because of how other school districts made changes, that sort of thing. So you can't look at this and receive a guarantee on this because it's not exact. But it won't go from 264 to 500,000 either. It's not that dramatic, right? There may be some slight changes each year, but overall, a lot of the districts have struggled with the same thing, and they're actually trying their best to be as efficient as they can already be. And unless they're willing to make changes like we're proposing here, then they're not going to be able to save additional money, or not going to be able to gain any efficiency over what you would gain. So it's important to note that. Are there costs? Yes, there are costs. This cost was based solely on the cost of what we thought the cost might be for health care. There is additional cost for retirement. It's our belief that even though there's additional cost for benefits, that it can be absorbed within the budget rating itself, and that the state would fund that. Stanley County schools would have to front the money the first year because transportation funding is always based on a look back year. So you look back 12 months at the data from last year, that's what's put into the formula for this year, and it generates the rating, okay? So Stanley County schools would have to front some money on the front side to pay the drivers and that kind of thing. And then by the next year, you play catch up, and you get the money back for next year. All right. How is transportation staff impacted? Bus driver shortage, of course, would be alleviated. That's a good thing. The office and mechanical staff really wouldn't see that much of a change. The bus is going to be driving a certain amount of miles anyway, so more preventive maintenance on buses would be expected, more routine maintenance would be performed. 30-day inspections would go down because there are 20 fewer buses, so you don't do as many 30-day inspections. But overall, we don't think there'd be a significant change in their responsibilities. You still got to do routing for all the buses, that kind of thing. So there would not be a significant change in what the staff would experience. Common impact on schools. Of course, if buses are delayed on first tier, then a bus serving a second tier is going to be delayed as well. And that's a negative impact for some of the schools. Our goal, again, is to build in the actual coverage so that that second tier school would not be as impacted as greatly, okay? And if you design the system right, it'll work. School staff, we got to be ready up to 30 minutes prior to. They already are, so that's not a big deal. School staff will be required to wait with students in the afternoon if buses are delayed. Yes, that will happen. I can tell you that there are other school districts, won't name them out loud, I've worked for one of them, that if you arrive 30 minutes after the bell rings, you're on time. There's at least one school district in the state that does that right now. That's not good. No teacher wants to wait 30 minutes for students to get there, or for buses to get there with their students. So we're not going to design a system that way here, okay? I would not be standing here telling you it would work if I didn't think it would work. Bus drivers may not be school-based employees. That's not too big an issue. You already have some school bus drivers that are not school-based employees anyway. If you were going to a system where all of your folks were school-based and you were hiring folks that weren't, there might be concerns about that. But you've already got school bus drivers that are not school-based and they're already driving for you, so that's not too big a deal. All right. Common impacts on parents and students. Again, the personal schedules is something that is just a fact. I mean, it's not something we run from, not which we try to disguise. Some people will have personal schedules affected, and we have to be able to deal with that. Earlier or later wake-up times for students, depending on school start time, is also an impact. Before and after school care arrangements may be needed, and I know that's probably a concern some of you have that are here tonight. And then, of course, after school programs may be affected as well. Bell schedule timeline, we're down the list all the way down to public comment meetings. We've tried to do most of the work. I've got a little bit of work left to do with transportation staff to finalize some things. But again, keep in mind, no decision has been made. The board is looking for a proposal from us, and they have to vote for it, yes or no. We've not predetermined what's going to happen. We've simply gone through the analysis work, tried to make sure we give the board an option on what to do to solve some of these problems. And I'll be honest with you, it comes down to, do you want to solve the problems or don't you? Are you going to be satisfied with it if you don't solve the problems? And if you are, that's fine. But if you're not, then you really don't, what are your other options? There are not many other options to consider other than what we're putting in front of you. So that's kind of where we are. Task force, thank you very much for the folks that participated on the task force. They were very helpful in making suggestions about things, and as we worked through the process, we met several times, and we're really appreciative that they were part of that. I'm going to transition to a quick question and answer document, which is also posted on the internet, because most people want to know the exact times of what their school start times are going to be. And so I wanted to go over that with you very quickly. High schools, again, no change. Middle schools, one change. Albemarle Middle, as you can see here, 8:50 to 3:55 would be their start time and end time. And then the elementary schools, as you see on the screen, Norwood, Baden, East Albemarle, Indy, and Locust will be 7:30 start. And Aquadale, Richfield, Central, Milling Point, Stanfield will be 9 o'clock. Oakboro Choice only has one bus, and it could not be paired really. It means any schools anyway. And sticking with the concept of trying to change as little as possible, we didn't change their bell time at all. So that's pretty much what you see there. There are other types of question and answers that you can certainly view online. I'm not going to spend time doing that because I know we want to get to the public comment time frame. So I think at this time we'll transition to that and allow people to, I think you have 3 minutes to speak if you wish to do so. And it is being recorded, by the way. We're going to take notes as well, and this information will be shared with the board when the proposal is done to the board. So thank you very much for allowing me to have time to speak to you. I hope you have a little bit better understanding about what's happening and why it's happening, and I will turn it back over to our staff.
I believe Mr. Poplin will be facilitating this next section. But for those of you that signed up to speak, and we're going to be taking notes, and we'll be adding to the question and answer that's on our website, because we'll have another meeting tomorrow night as well. So we want to make sure that we have all the questions recorded and we can answer for everyone. So, do you have some minutes?
did have a sign up for public comments. It will be limited to 3 minutes. It is not a question and answer. Again, what Scott Denton talked about, we're here to gather information and relay to the board your concerns. We will take time at the end if you have a question. We'll be able to put those on note card at the back and we'll collect those. First person speaking, Melissa Zaleski.
Okay. I have copies of my notes because I'm going to have to talk super fast because originally it was posted that everybody would speak for 5 minutes and now it's 3, but I can do it.
Thank you, ma'am.
Good evening. Y'all want me here or up there? Okay. Good evening. My name is Melissa Zaleski and I'm the owner and director of Melissa Kathleen School of Dance. Both of my children attended Stanley County Public Schools and public universities. I'm a former substitute teacher for the schools and have taught thousands of children in Stanley County over the last 21 years. The students in my studio feed from nearly every single school in Stanley County. This proposal will be extremely detrimental to my business and other businesses like mine, but that isn't the main reason I'm here tonight. It's only one of them. The newly proposed time change, which my numbers are different in this, so you're just going to have to adjust to what was recently changed, will delay my start times by at least an hour and a half. Currently, I start at 3 to 3:30 and finish at 8:30 every night. Parents are not going to want their children out after 8:30 when they haven't even come home from school to finish their homework or eat dinner. You will cut my operation in time every day by an hour and a half. Other school activities, such as music lessons, gymnastics, intramural or league sports, will be similarly affected. There are numerous studies that show children who engage in organized activities outside of school perform better academically and are more confident individuals. I realize completely that academics are important, but universities look for well-rounded students who are going to bring more to the table than just good grades. With all the cuts to arts, PE, and sporting programs, we are greatly hindering our children's ability to compete in college admission and acceptance. Dance, music, theater, and other organized activities outside of school provide students with balance, time management skills, leadership skills, and an overall healthy mind and body. This school board proposal will make these activities impossible to continue for some students. You propose pairing the elementary schools up in order to share buses, and this is supposed to save money. However, it's only passing the cost off to the parents who have to find morning or after-school care for their children. And you're saying that we can drop the kids off early. How are you going to pay for the staff? That's going to take away from the profits. This is also detrimental to the students who are going to begin their school day in a classroom early, prior to their instructional time, up to an hour early. Will they be coloring pictures, just sitting quietly, sleeping, when they've already been woken to start their day? What about the children who already have behavioral issues? I cannot see how this will do anything besides make their days longer and cause them more distress and start their days off the wrong foot. Every child will have the link to lengthen their workday, and you will almost definitely see a decline in their academic performance, not to mention their behavior. How will athletics and arts programs be affected? What do you plan to do about the school sports when you have half the children finishing at different times? Half the elementary kids will be split. When these children feed into programs with other schools and counties, the difficulties are enormous. Starting only one middle school at a later time will cause all middle school sports to be delayed, and it will have a trickle-down effect into all other activities and family time. What are student athletes going to do while they wait for one school to finish? Is my time up?
Yes, ma'am.
That's okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Anna Lowry.
Can everyone hear her in the back? The speakers? Can you hear the speaker?
It doesn't sound like it's on.
All right, hold on. It is on. Check, check. Can we get the volume up? Check, 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 check. It's on. Check, check. Yeah. Just get, let's check the other mic.
Thanks.
I just want everybody to be able to hear. Check, check. Do you want to come on up here?
Just have them come up.
Yeah, just come up here.
That mic is.
My name is Anna Louder. I have 3 students here in Stanley County School Systems. I'm employed Cabarrus County Schools. I work at Mount Pleasant High School, so I'm very familiar with the tiered program. I am actually going to finish up some of Melissa's questions here that were also concerns of mine as well too. Have you considered parents that have to work early cannot afford the afternoon morning care? There's so many in our county who do not have outside support systems to help with school transportation transportation? Single parents, do you expect them to leave their 5-year-old at home alone in order to catch the bus? Staff, are you expecting the staff that already floats to numerous schools within the county to vastly adjust their times to where they're working completely different schedules between your nurses, your PE teachers, your art and music teachers? They already have to flex their times, but then if they're having to be at different schools at different times, I mean, that's a vast variance in the times every week that they're going to have to work. And finally, have you done cost analysis for shuttling several of the lower populated schools and pulling those resources into creating new, larger elementary schools? I mean, it seems to me that, you know, we're looking for money, but we have lots of schools that are not at capacity. I've had my son, who is only in the 3rd grade, who 2 years has been in a combination classroom simply because the schools were not filled. So therefore, if we can consolidate these schools and have more of our resources pooled to a smaller number of schools, that seems to answer a lot of the problems that we have going on in Stanley County school system. The other thing as well, like I said, I work in Cabarrus County. I'm familiar with the tiered. My question is why are we splitting up schools that are the same age into doing? I saw the presentation on there, but like in our school system, it's a little more organized in that all of our elementary schools are a certain time, all of our middle schools and all of our high schools are a certain time. So it seems to me to make a little bit more sense to have it more of an organized chaos versus more disorganization. But also for me as a mother of 3, there's going to be a time where I have children at every single age of school here in Stanley County. I'm already running all over the county, you know, picking up, dropping off, getting them to their activities, and then we're going to add to where I'm also going to have to add an extra hour of pickup time between getting my children from one school and another school, because fortunately at the school that I do work at in Cabarrus County, I get off at 2:30, so I'm able to do my pickup for my children in the afternoons. But not everybody has that same, you know, capability. So, but the bottom line is I do not believe that this is in the interest of our students, our parents, our teachers, our support staff, independent businesses that are providing extracurricular activities to our Stanley County youth.
Miss Angela Albright.
Hi. I am here to share questions and concerns of Albemarle Middle School's teachers, since we noticed we had no representation on the task force and we were the only middle school being impacted. We want to point out that we did not receive the survey that is stated to have been sent out in February on the presentation. We would like to know what efforts have been made in dealing with the other middle schools in the Rocky River Middle School Athletic Conference relating to sports schedules. Many AMS coaches have noted that they will be unable to coach if we have a 4 o'clock dismissal time. They cite having late practices and having to miss instructional time in their classrooms as being huge problems. We may not be able to offer sports that students at other middle schools are able to participate in. Is this equitable? Can we be guaranteed student athletes will not miss academic time with a 4 o'clock dismissal? On the QA sheet on the Stanley County Schools webpage, there's a list of a lot of benefits of not changing middle school bell times. Well, one of these benefits was protected instructional time. Why are Albemarle Middle School students not provided these same benefits? Is this equitable? If student athletes and coaches are missing class time, we will be sending a loud and clear message to our students. Athletics are more important than academics. Who will cover the classes of the coaches who must leave early to go to games? Will AMS still be able to host games at their school? Will AMS miss out on money raised by these games? Is this equitable? During some sports seasons, many AMS students will be walking home in the dark after practices. Is this equitable? Many AMS students are dropped off at bus stops and must walk home, sometimes quite a distance. Several students have expressed concerns to us about having to walk home in the dark. If they're getting off the bus 1 hour later, this may mean it is quite as dark during winter months. Is this equitable? AMS teachers offer our students after-school tutorials and clubs. We offer parents after-school conferences. However, these same teachers are going to have to leave directly after school to make sure their children are picked up from daycares before they close. Is this equitable? Teachers at Albemarle Middle School will have to take many more sick and personal days because they will be unable to make appointments after school. Why would a teacher choose to work at the only middle school in the county where they will be unable to bank sick and personal days for their retirement? Is this equitable? Why would a teacher choose to work at AMS if their daycare bill is going to double, or if they have never had to rely on daycare but are suddenly forced to? These teachers could move to another middle school and save money. Is this equitable? We understand that this is being done to save money, but is there really going to be that much of a savings at the expense of one middle school? We want equitableness.
Thank you, Ms. Allen. Next, Catherine Patterson.
Hi, my name's Catherine Patterson. I work at Albemarle Middle School. Next year, I will have 4 children that will attend Baden Elementary School. We are so excited that my youngest daughter is finally starting kindergarten, because that means no more daycare. Our plan was to have the bus pick our children up, as we always do, then a family friend picks them up at the school in Baden and drops them off at Albemarle Middle School. This is the way that it's been done, and this is what we are planning on doing next year. However, with the change in start times at Albemarle Middle School, I am now facing a $1,360 bill at daycare a month. That's $85 per day, times 4 children, times about 4 weeks a month. I did not put money in my Flex account during our open enrollment this year, and this is going to greatly impact our budget. I feel the changes to Albemarle Middle School time is not equitable. I could transfer to another middle school and save about $13,000 a month, or $1,300 a month. However, I have spent my teaching career at Albemarle Middle School. I am passionate about what I do, and I love this school and the students that I work with. It breaks my heart that I'm gonna have to leave the school to pay for daycare. So believe me, these are some of my, besides my concerns about this I've already shared, I've got some questions. I noticed that the Q&A sheet, it said that schools will open at 8 o'clock for parents who need to drop their kids off early. Will the school stay open for parents who need to pick up their children late? Our principal did mention that staggered start times were being discussed at the beginning of the school year, and I shared my concerns with administration at this time. However, no details were shared. I, too, did not receive a February survey as a parent or a teacher. Nothing else was said about until I saw this meeting on Facebook. If this idea has been on the table, why haven't we known about it, especially as a school staff member? I feel later and earlier start times may cause a problem for all parents and teachers involved. I believe it is important for things to be equitable across the board, and I don't believe that making Albemarle Middle School the only middle school that changes its start time is making things equitable. Not for the students, not for the teachers, not for the parents, not for the coaches, then who is this fair for? I agree that with everything the speakers had said, especially the principals, about protecting our instructional time. That should be the most important thing. So what is that saying to our students, that they're going to leave early for games? Or other students are having to stay later at schools to play games. I can't do after school tutoring any longer. And I just received an email about 5 o'clock that open enrollment doesn't end until the end of March. This decision's not going to be decided until April. So I won't even have the opportunity by the time you guys make this decision to have any kind of money taken out from my Flex account. You got anything else you need me to add from your speech? Yes. I'm a joking girl. I can talk fast. Read that one. And before. I tried.
Hey, can I have one sentence if the mic was on for me?
Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Next, Ms. Penny Morgan.
Thank you, I'm nervous, Mr. Pipeline and Ms. Calvert. Anyway, I had not planned to speak, but my teacher signed me up. Thank you, ladies. First, I want to say, if it's going to be one middle school, it needs to be all middle schools for all those reasons. Secondly, I want to say that I have many students at my doors at 7:15 in the morning because of work. And we open our doors at 7:15, and they'll still be there at 7:15 even if we start at 9. Our school is full of parents who can't afford childcare. We are 100% free and reduced lunch. Well, actually like 80, but because we're so high, it's 100. AMS students are, a lot of them are the childcare for their families. They stay with little brothers and sisters while their parents go to work second shift. What will happen to those little ones? And they already can't afford the daycare money that Ms. Patterson was speaking about. So I'm afraid we're going to have a hardship on, young students are going to be left alone. Attracting teachers is a very difficult problem for AMS, to get and keep a teacher. You can walk in North Stanley Middle, you can go down to South Stanley Middle. I know almost everybody because a lot of them started at AMS and they just burn out because I love our school, but it's just hard to keep great teachers at my school all the time. So I'm blessed to have teachers like Kat and Angela who choose to stay, and Miss Davis, Mr. Doherty, and Miss Thompson. So our school needs to have some perks, and being the only school on a different schedule is definitely not a perk. Secondly, how many comments have I heard this past month? I'll have to transfer to another school to teach, or even worse, I'm going to have to transfer to another county. We have a lot of great teachers that we might lose. And I agree with Anna when she talked about let's go all middle, no middle, all high, no high, or all elementary, no elementary. And I heard so many times the slideshow earlier that this is not recommended for middle or high school. I heard it 3 times. This is not recommended for middle or high school. This is not recommended for middle or high school. Therefore, please, let's not do it to Albemarle Middle School. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Tamara Honeycutt.
My name's Tamara Honeycutt, and I do work for Cabarrus County Schools. So I understand the 2-tier, 3-tier stuff. I am a substitute driver. I don't work every day. And I can if I want to, because they treat our drivers with high respect. We have excellent principals that hold us. I've spoken with my kids' bus drivers. She won't tell me what she gets paid, but as a sub, I'm on the bottom of the list, and I get paid a lot more than her, than a regular driver. There's probably, I can probably name 6 to 8 drivers just in my little part that are from Stanley County. They have left y'all. My kids go to Stanley County. I want them to continue. But if you go and change all this stuff up, I'm not going to be able to work because I'm going to have a middle schooler next year. I'm going to have an elementary kid. I mean, I can't. We have what you're talking about, the person that's going to do the busing and stuff. It's called our planner. Our APs they don't call for subs. I mean, he does everything and puts it together, and he has it well balanced. He's from Mecklenburg County, best guy we've ever had. So getting that right there will help your APs. That's a good thing. But until you pay the bus drivers a little bit more Stanley County drivers are going to come to other counties. And that's the only way you're going to keep them. And I don't know how else to say it, but we do high school, a 7 to 2 base. Elementary's kind of an 8 to 3, and middle school is 9 to 4, but it's straight cross. It's not one middle school here. It's got to be straight, however you look at it. Okay?
Next, Kevin Robinson. Okay. Thank you. Melissa Ball.
Mine was more along the line of questions that I just wondered how it was going to affect different aspects of the school day.
more along the lines of siblings not being able to take care of other siblings when they get off the bus, or, you know, how some schedules were going to be with like the middle schools, with the one school being different than the others, how that was going to affect the schedule of everyone. And it was just a trickle-down effect. And I felt like all the schools, like each grade, like all the elementaries, and I heard the earlier speech about y'all tried to work that out, but for extracurricular, all kind of activities, tutoring and all kinds of stuff like that, for it to be elementary schools all together, middle schools all together, high schools all together, as a parent, it just makes more sense that way. And as far as going back to the teachers, how is it gonna affect their days as being longer? For like my school, my son's elementary school is gonna be going, they could start dropping off at 8. How are they gonna adjust these teachers' times to adjust for the teachers that do show up early and stay late? You know, those teachers aren't gonna be able to be in morning meetings, so they're gonna be missing meetings during the day. How is that gonna affect, you know, afternoon meetings and school activities and stuff like that? That's some of the things those were some of the questions that I was going to have, is how is that going to affect the times, the meetings, and all that, and things that way. And the other thing is, I know a couple years ago they did away with snacks during the day because they adjusted the meal times. How are they going to adjust the meal times for the children who do have the later start? Are they going to have snack times during the days? Because that could mean that some of these kids are eating at 7:30 before they leave home to be dropped off at 8, and that their lunch could not be until like 12, 1 o'clock that day. And so those are other things, because if kids are hungry, I know this might sound crazy, but if they're hungry, they're not going to be able to pay attention. So are we going to factor in snack times for those children? And then that's going to take away from instructional time, I feel like. That, you know, are we going to build in more time during the day, say 15 extra minutes in the day for snack time? As trivial as that might sound, that's also a concern because kids can't pay attention if they're hungry. So those were my concerns.
Thank you. Next, Ginger Whitmer.
I just want to let you know I'm a mother of 3 and all different ages. I wanted to find out, what research have you guys done? There's so much research that high schoolers and middle schoolers are not getting enough sleep. They should be having 8 to 10 hours of sleep a night. They're going through adolescence, hormone changes. They're not getting the sleep. When they don't get this sleep academically, they don't perform at grade level or above. So I'm thinking that the high schoolers should be starting later so they can get the sleep. Elementary, we can get our elementary students to bed early and get them up and get them to school. I agree with the second speaker about behavior problems. These students that are just going to be sitting here for an hour doing nothing, by the time they get in the classroom, can you imagine what their behavior is going to be? They're already on Chromebooks, they're already on different things. They need something other than sitting there reading a book for that hour. Another thing is, most of your high schoolers have lights on the fields. Most of them can do tutoring, peer tutoring in the mornings, if y'all offer that. Splitting up the elementary schools, where this school is going to go this time versus this time, it is going to affect the games, the sporting events. Because if Indy plays Stanfield, guess what happens? Then we have to start later. Parents, we are all working as hard as we possibly can to get our students to point A to point B to point C while trying to educate them and trying to keep them on task. I think your high schoolers are able to do a lot of driving. We have more middle schooler buses than what we do, or elementary school buses than we do the high school and middle school buses. If you start high school at 4 and you use those buses as your elementary school, and like you said, do a double shift in a apartment complex, you drop that off, just like we did in the recession in 2010, 11, and 12. That went on. She went to Locust Elementary, they dropped them off, come back 10 minutes later, picking up another load. So I don't agree that it's in the best interest. You said your first goal here was students' best interest. Okay? What is our children's best interest? Elementary school needs that time, and we can help them get into bed. My high schooler, I can't help her to get into bed because she's going to be studying.
Thank you. Thank you. Ms. Carla Papa, please.
I'm going to touch on a little bit of what Melissa had left from her speech, but it was also a concern of mine. We already have an Oakburg school that earlier this year was absolutely, or last year was absolutely necessary according to the school board. And more people are choosing to pull their kids and send them to charter schools. The costs involved in utilities and maintenance for all the current school buildings must be taken into consideration. You will not save any money. That with proposal because of the lights, heat, air, will have to be on to allow early drop-off students that will be starting later. Those that can't afford it will start considering private education. Stanley County Public School attendance will drop even further. How is busing every kid from the county to one school efficient? If we're worried about bus efficiency, and we already do 2 double loads at Central, they already do that. How is busing everybody to one school more efficient than cutting 20 buses? It's not the way I look at it. And I agree with Anna. I don't agree with starting some of the elementary schools at different times just because of after school stuff. Both of my kids are involved in after school activities. And I also have a child in the EC department. How are you going to deal with an EC child getting to school 45 to an hour early? You're going to have specialized personnel sitting in there with them until school starts? I see that being a huge issue unless you run separate buses for EC in the morning. And that goes for any kid with any other ADHD kind of issues. Sitting for 15 minutes before announcement starts can be an issue, much less 30 to 45 minutes in the cafeteria.
We do appreciate all the input, all the comments. Of course, we were writing just as far as we could, I promise. That will conclude our meeting. If you do have a question that you would like to answer that maybe you didn't get answered tonight, I think that Ms. Post is at the back with some cards and some pens. Please stop and ask questions. The team will work on it. And again, we appreciate you sharing with us so we can relay to the board. Thank you. Have a good night.